Husband Ryan deceived me into signing the divorce papers. Baby, he said softly, I can't be so selfish as to let you waste your whole life on me. In my previous life, I was so moved by his words that tears streamed down my face. I truly believed that I could never meet a man better than him. Even after the divorce, despite the gossip and humiliation, I stayed in his family's home, caring for his parents in his place. I remained faithful to him for the rest of my life. It wasn't until the moment I closed my eyes forever that I learned the truth. Ryan had changed his name long ago and used my dowry to buy himself a bright future. Now he had a beautiful wife, adorable children, and a life of luxury and comfort. In this life, the moment I got the divorce papers, I packed up all my dowry and left without hesitation. My former in-laws and Ryan's younger sister stood at the door, staring at the empty house in shock. Then they rushed to my parents' home, demanding to know where I had gone. But my parents were overjoyed. My father said with satisfaction, "My daughter divorced that worthless son-in-law of yours long ago. What right do you people have to ask her to take care of her ex-husband's parents or his sister?" When I was reborn, it was the exact moment Ryan dragged me to the courthouse to file for divorce. He knew perfectly well how much slander and cruelty a divorced woman would suffer in that era. Yet after handing me the divorce papers, he still put on a show of deep affection, acting as though he were heartbroken. "Emma," he said gently, "I love you, but I can't let you be burdened by me. After the divorce, you'll meet someone better." I nodded slightly. Compared to what I had endured in my previous life, a divorce paper and a little gossip meant nothing to me now. In that past life, when Ryan learned that the woman he had always loved, Lily, had divorced her husband, he became restless and uneasy. At that time, we had been married for less than a year. I was a dutiful wife, respectful to his parents, kind to his relatives. No one could say a bad word about me, but Ryan couldn't find a reasonable excuse to leave me, so he pretended to have cancer, claiming he didn't have much time left and couldn't bear to drag me down with him. He knew exactly how much I loved him, so much that I would rather die than leave his side. After the divorce, I still stayed in his family's home, taking care of his ill parents and supporting his younger sister through school, believing that Ryan had truly died of his illness. 35 years later, I lay dying on a hospital bed, frail, childless, and completely alone. His parents were still healthy and strong, his sister had a successful career and a large family. None of them ever came to visit me, not even once. They even brought Ryan, living under a new name, and Lily back home. The whole family reunited in warmth and laughter. Lily, dressed in an expensive fur coat, looked at me with a mix of pity and mockery. "Emma," she said sweetly, "Ryan never loved you. He only told you he was too sick to touch you because he wanted to stay faithful to me. You should really thank us for taking care of your dowry. The jade ornaments and antique paintings you brought are priceless now. We'll keep them as family heirlooms for our children." Ryan's parents didn't care about my despair at all. The only thing that concerned them was when I would finally die. Even his sister, the same one I had sold scrap metal and even my own blood to help through college, came to me and said coldly, "Sister-in-law, you gave my brother such a big dowry. Surely you still have some money left, right? And those antiques in the ancestral house, hand them over. If you've donated everything else, at least leave something for me. Otherwise, when you die, I won't bother bringing my son to your funeral." I told her coldly that I had nothing left. The sister-in-law, who once pretended to be gentle and understanding, immediately dropped her act, her face twisting into one of greed and malice. Her eyes burned with resentment as she glared at me. "Not giving money, huh? Then rot away in that hospital. No one's gonna bother picking up your corpse." The memories flashed before my eyes. Ryan was still completely immersed in his act of tragic, deep devotion, unable to break free from his own performance. His hands trembled as he handed me the divorce papers. His eyes were red, and a bitter smile curved on his lips. "Emma," he said softly, "don't look back. Keep walking forward. Once I'm gone, you'll definitely find someone who truly cherishes you." I nodded. Seeing my calm and indifferent expression, Ryan seemed caught off guard. His plan wasn't going as he expected, and a flicker of panic crossed his face. He coughed deliberately a few times, covering his mouth with a handkerchief, then spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes turned bloodshot as he looked at me with what he thought was pain and lingering affection. I let out a faint, mocking smile. In my previous life, Lily once said Ryan would go as far as drinking chicken blood if that's what it took to trick me into divorcing him. Turns out, she was right. Under his confused and shocked gaze, I sat down calmly and made myself a cup of malted milk. It was sweet. Surprisingly so. In my past life, I used to wake up at 2 a.m. to grind soybeans for tofu, while my in-laws and Ryan's sister were still fast asleep. I would finish making breakfast and keep it warm on the stove before heading out at dawn to sell tofu at the market. After returning home from the morning market, I went straight to the fields to work. My in-laws were old and sick, unable to do any heavy labor, and Ryan's sister was in middle school, only coming home once every 2 weeks. There was no one to help me with anything. Sometimes I even waded into the river to catch shrimp and fish to nourish them. When I finally managed to buy a little meat, I'd render the fat and keep the crispy bits. I didn't dare eat any myself. I divided everything into 2 portions. One for my in-laws' porridge, since a little fat made it more nutritious, and the other to fry pickled vegetables and pancakes for Ryan's sister to take to school. And me? I lived on whatever scraps were left. While making tofu, I would chew on a few pieces of hard corn bread or boiled sweet potatoes just to get by. That's why, despite being young, I developed severe stomach ulcers. That bottle of malted milk, yes, this one, I'd once asked someone from the city to buy it for me, intending to give it to my in-laws to improve their health. But now? That whole family of wolves and snakes. This life, I'll stay as far away from them as I can. Seeing me completely stray from the script, Ryan awkwardly forced a smile and tried to speak gently. "Emma," he said in a trembling voice, "could you maybe leave your dowry behind for me? Just as a keepsake?" I lifted my head and stared straight at that deceitful man. Under his puzzled gaze, I smiled pleasantly. "Sure," I said. "My family has been merchants for generations. Long before the founding of the nation, we were already wealthy beyond measure. For generations, we've lived by our family's creed, to do good and accumulate virtue. During the war, my grandfather sold nearly all our family's assets to support the resistance against the invaders. Aside from our ancestral house, which couldn't legally be transferred, what remained was a small chest of gold bars set aside for me. My parents doted on me as their only daughter, treating me like a gem, but they never placed too much importance on those ancestral riches. It was just backup, in case I ever wanted to rebuild the family business. In my previous life, I couldn't bear to let Ryan, who I thought was terminally ill, leave alone. So I told him about the secret of our ancestral house. Who could have known that he'd take my fortune, support his mistress, have a child with her, and later thrive in business after the economic reforms? Coming back to this life, I can only feel thankful that I hadn't yet told him about that secret. Ryan still had his eyes fixed on the few dozen gold bars in my dowry. Hearing me agree to leave them as a keepsake, he was overjoyed. He rushed out of the house, no doubt, eager to boast to his beloved Lily. Once he was gone and the house was quiet, I crouched down by the bed, lifted the wooden planks from the floor, and took out the gold bars hidden underneath. Then, just as I had planned, I replaced every single one of them with fake gold. Brass blocks wrapped in a thin layer of gold foil. Back during the wartime occupation, my grandfather had crafted these fakes to outwit the traitors who sold out their country. My grandfather had made those fake gold bars so perfectly that they looked just like the real thing. I felt completely confident. Ryan was so drunk on his own excitement that he couldn't tell real from fake. To be more accurate, he was too confident in his own charm. In my past life, there had been an Emma who loved him so blindly that after her husband died, she had no will to hold on to any of her wealth. But in this life, I gathered everything that belonged to me and cleared it out, down to the last speck of dust. My parents had already been notified in advance, and they arrived with a few of my cousins, waiting by the gate. Everything had been neatly packed, loaded onto an ox cart, and taken back to my family home. Aside from a few cracked pots and some broken bowls left on the stove, the entire Carter house was empty. When I married into that family, the place had been just as bare. And now, leaving, I made sure to return it to that exact state. My parents and cousins helped me settle onto the cart, all smiling in satisfaction. "Let's go home," my father said. That evening, my former in-laws and Ryan's sister finally came back. The moment they stepped inside, they froze in shock. The walls were cracked, the roof had partially collapsed, and the house looked like it had been looted clean. They screamed my name and shouted throughout the neighborhood, demanding to know where I was. Eventually, guided by some neighbors, they stormed angrily toward my family's house. "Emma, get out here!" Ryan's mother shrieked. "Who gave you the nerve to take everything from our house? Return our blankets, our sewing machine, our bicycle, right now." Ryan's mother, who always acted so frail and pitiful, clutched her chest and wailed dramatically. His sister, Claire, and his father, George Carter, both followed behind, their faces twisted in fury. The commotion drew a crowd. Villagers quickly gathered around, filling the entire yard to watch the scene unfold. My parents stepped outside as soon as they heard the shouting, but before they could speak, George barked at them. "Well, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, is this how you raise your daughter?" Without a word, she runs back to her parents' home and cleans out our entire house while she's at it. "Call Emma out here right now. She needs to return everything, not a single item missing." Before he could finish his tirade, one of my aunts charged forward and spat straight into his face. "Return your things? You shameless old turtle. Before my niece married into your Carter family, your house hadn't seen a proper piece of clothing in 3 generations. The bicycle, the sewing machine, the blankets, every last one of them came from her dowry. My brother and sister-in-law prepared them for Emma themselves. Even that shirt your youngest son is wearing was made from fabric out of her dowry. She sewed it with her own hands. And now you dare to call those things yours? You people don't own a damn thing." The crowd burst into laughter. Everyone started pointing and jeering at the Carters, hurling insults their way. Ryan's sister, Claire, blushed crimson and tugged awkwardly at her clothes, silently cursing my aunt for being too sharp-tongued. In her heart, she thought bitterly, so what if Emma brought those things when she got married? Once she became part of the Carter family, her dowry naturally belonged to us. What's there to argue about? My brother was too soft. If it were me, I'd have ruined her reputation, taken every penny of her dowry, and thrown her out. No way I'd let her divorce and leave so easily. George Carter was humiliated to the point that he couldn't even lift his head. But remembering his eldest son's instructions, he stubbornly stood his ground and tried to reason his way out. "Your daughter's been married for a year," he shouted. "We hardly ever saw her face, and as soon as my son got sick, she demanded a divorce. Then after leaving him, she emptied out our whole house. Tell me, folks, what kind of person does that? Isn't that heartless? Isn't that wolf-like behavior?" The villagers began to murmur. Slowly, opinions started to sway, and some even turned their blame toward me and my parents, calling us unkind and unreasonable. Seeing this, George Carter's eyes gleamed with smug satisfaction. His eldest son had been right. The public always sided with whoever looked weaker. Even though he couldn't understand why I hadn't acted according to the script they had planned. In the eyes of those self-righteous busybodies, a wife who divorced her husband soon after marriage, especially while he was supposedly ill, was bound to be condemned. And since the divorce papers were real, there was no denying it. The Carter family thought the Johnsons would crumble under public shame for the sake of reputation. No doubt, they thought they could pressure me into going back, force me to be their servant again, feeding that viper's nest of a family. They probably even expected me to spend more money just to beg my way back into their good graces. Claire stepped forward, pretending to be gentle. "Sister-in-law," she said softly, "I know you're not that kind of person. Please, come home with us. My brother's gone now, and my parents and I will take care of you. If we meet anyone decent, we'll even help you remarry. We're not trying to stop you from leaving. We're only worried about you." Her voice was sweet, her words smooth, better than a rehearsed song. She and her parents coordinated perfectly, one playing the harsh one, the other acting kind and considerate. In my past life, I had been spun around in circles by their act. Even back then, Ryan's younger brother Adam was already sly beyond his years. The whole scheme, Ryan faking his death to reunite with his beloved Lily while leaving me behind to toil for his family, had been largely Adam's idea. And yet, despite that, Adam had once fiercely opposed Ryan's decision to divorce me. I still remember what he said. "Only an idiot like my brother would let a woman like you go. If it were me, I'd never let you leave. What if you really walked away? Then we'd lose both the money and the advantage." But Ryan had been certain that I loved him too deeply, that even if we divorced, I would never remarry. He had been right. There really had been a woman foolish enough to waste her life for him. In that moment, remembering it all, I felt my chest tighten. I saw again that wicked smirk on Adam's face from my previous life, the moment he confessed with pride. "You know, it was worth it. The plan where I pushed you into the river and my brother pretended to dive in and save you. What a performance, huh? We really pulled that one off." I had been so furious I coughed up blood on the spot. So even the life-saving grace I had been repaying all those years had been fake. Ryan hadn't risked his life for me. He had staged the entire thing. That so-called deep affection, just a performance. How stupid I had been, wasting my whole life a fabricated act of kindness. Now, as I looked at their smug faces, identical to the ones I remembered from years ago, I felt my teeth grind with hatred. Then suddenly, I turned around, tears streaming down my cheeks, and cried out to the villagers. Ryan wasn't a man. He beat me and cursed me. And now his entire family's come here to drive me to death. I can't live like this anymore. With that, I spun around and ran straight toward the village well. My words exploded like oil thrown into a blazing fire. That day, I shocked the entire village by publicly exposing Ryan's hidden secrets. Later, I went to the local clinic. Under the examination of several experienced doctors and the village's elder midwives, the results were clear. I was still a virgin. When the villagers heard, their disgust toward Ryan deepened into pure outrage, especially when they saw the bruises I had deliberately pressed onto my arms and legs earlier. They all shouted in fury, calling Ryan a beast and the entire Carter family a den of wolves. My parents, uncles, and aunts had been waiting for this. The moment they heard the villagers' condemnation, they charged forward, hitting and cursing the Carters with righteous fury. Adam couldn't dodge fast enough. One of my cousins punched him straight in the face, shattering his glasses. In the chaos, as he stumbled to find them, an angry villager stomped on his hand. The sound of snapping fingers echoed through the crowd. If the village chief and a few Carter relatives hadn't arrived in time, George and Adam might not have made it out alive. Adam's face was swollen and bruised, his eyes filled with rage as he glared at me. But I wasn't afraid. I spat straight at him. Adam and his mother, Lisa, who was always pretending to be weak and sickly, both went pale with fury, their faces gray as ashes. Seeing Adam's murderous expression, I knew he now hated not only me, but also his own brother, Ryan. So I decided to twist the knife a little deeper. With a calm smile, I said I wanted to go to the Carter house to retrieve my dowry. Under the eyes of the entire village, I walked to the bedroom, lifted the floorboards under the bed, and revealed only an empty box. Nothing was left inside. Adam's face instantly darkened, his expression turning as cold and venomous as a snake hissing in the shadows. Ha! Looks like nothing went according to plan this time, I thought. In my previous life, when Ryan fled, he'd left behind 5 gold bars for his clever little brother as a reward. But in this life, the plan had changed. Ryan had taken everything for himself and disappeared without a trace. Just moments ago, I'd caught sight of Ryan quietly slipping away from the crowd. Typical. I knew the entire Carter family far too well. Every single one of them was a master at bending whichever way the wind blew. Their selfishness ran in their blood, and they always chose whatever benefited themselves most. Honestly, I was looking forward to the day when the 2 brothers, Ryan and Adam, who had once been as close as hands and feet, would turn on each other like rabid dogs, tearing each other apart. After being reborn, I no longer bothered to hide the drastic change in my personality. My parents and cousins worried about me, feeling both distressed and protective, but I didn't care. I simply said coldly, "Better blind than ever, look at another man again." My family's hatred for the Carters only deepened after that, their anger seething through every word. A few of my cousins eventually ran into Adam one day while he was on his way to school in the nearby town, and they gave him the beating of a lifetime. Perhaps they hit him too hard, because from then on, Adam no longer looked young or naive. The face now glaring at me was eerily similar to the one from my past life, cold, calculating, and filled with poisonous malice far beyond his years. "How do you explain this, Emma?" he hissed between clenched teeth. "You've been reborn too, haven't you? You're just as cruel as you are deceitful. In our past life, no matter what happened, we were still family for a lifetime. And now you want to destroy my parents, and me too?" I let out a cold laugh. "You already know that, and still dared to show your face in front of me? Guess you really have a death wish." Then I turned toward my cousins who were standing nearby watching the scene unfold. "He just threatened me," I said calmly. "You guys, teach him a lesson." Adam's face twisted with rage. "Emma, you can only call for help? Is that all you've got?" I smiled, my voice light and mocking. "Of course, why wouldn't I?" In my past life, when I had grown old and frail, Ryan had returned, smug as ever, and told me, "Your parents and family are all gone now. Even if I killed you, no one would care." Adam had stood right beside him, calmly suggesting crueler, faster ways for me to die. But now things were different. My parents were still alive, my family whole and strong. I was the only daughter in the Johnson family, and my cousins, all big, strong men, would do anything I asked. Adam could choke on his hatred for all I cared. He could take it as repayment for the blood debt his entire family owed me. "From now on," I said coldly, "I don't ever want to see another Carter in front of me again. If I do, once, just once, they'll regret it." With that, I turned on my heel and left, tossing one last look over my shoulder at Adam's swollen, bruised face. He screamed after me, half crazed. "Don't think we can't survive without you. You know perfectly well the power my brother and I held in our last life. One day, you'll be the one kneeling and begging me for mercy." I laughed without even looking back. "Daydreaming again, Adam? You're so capable. Why don't you focus on paying your next semester's tuition first?" When I returned home, I gathered my cousins together for a meeting. I told them to study hard and aim for college. They all groaned, complaining about how hard it was and how poor we were. I didn't comfort them. My tone was firm and serious. "No matter the era," I said, "education is still the fastest path to changing your life. As for me, I was already too old to return to school, and besides, I carried the knowledge of my past life. I planned to do what I knew best, what my hands were made for. In my previous life, I had built a business from the ground up entirely on my own. The entire Carter family, Ryan's parents, Adam, his wife and children, had all lived off my hard work. For years, I had supported them all, and when I died, I left them only enough money to cover their daily expenses. Every other penny of my wealth I had donated to the state. That was why they had hated me so bitterly. But my family, the Johnsons, had lived by the same guiding principle for generations. What you take from the people, return to the people. Ryan and I were never meant to be husband and wife. From our very core, we were opposites, fundamentally incompatible. After making all the necessary arrangements at home, I took several gold bars, exchanged them for cash at the goldsmiths, and traveled to the city. There I began purchasing several plots of land in the undeveloped outskirts, places most people still thought were worthless. I bought the land at a reasonable price. In just a few years, that very area would become the site of the largest hospital in the city, and the surrounding roads would grow busier and more prosperous with each passing year. A property like that would soon be worth its weight in gold. Once all the paperwork was done, I opened 2 businesses, a small restaurant and a scrap collection shop. The restaurant was run by my second aunt, who took charge of the kitchen. Her family once had an imperial chef, and years ago, one of her dishes, amber pork, had been praised endlessly by a visiting city official during a banquet in Westfield. Later, people even offered her a hefty sum to become a private cook for an influential family whose patriarch had fallen ill and lost his appetite. Unfortunately, due to overwork, my aunt had fainted one day and accidentally cut the tendons in her hand, leaving her unable to hold a knife again. So when she mentioned wanting to take a job at a steel factory to help support her family, I convinced my parents to stop her. Then, I personally handed her the keys to the newly renovated restaurant. "From now on," I said with a smile, "this restaurant is ours. I'll provide the capital and ingredients, and you'll handle the cooking. We'll split the profits 50-50 for the first 5 years. After my older brother and cousins get married, we'll divide it 70-30. You 70, me 30. Moved by my words, Aunt Helen agreed and threw herself into the business. Before long, her restaurant flourished, packed every day with customers, and money began pouring in. As for me, I focused on running the scrap collection shop, the same kind of business where I had earned my first fortune in my past life. I spent 500 yuan to purchase the entire inventory and ownership of a small warehouse. At that time, people didn't pay much attention to antiques or rare books. But thanks to the keen eye I had inherited from my ancestors, I recognized their true value. In my past life, I had collected countless rare manuscripts and valuable old books that others sold as worthless junk. Some of the paintings and calligraphy pieces I preserved were later auctioned at Christie's for six-figure sums, ultimately bought by prominent collectors and kept as national treasures. My aunt and I each walked our own paths, yet both of our ventures prospered. Inspired by our success, my parents eventually followed suit. With my encouragement, they decided to give up their so-called iron rice bowl, their stable government jobs, and step into the world of business. At that time, most people still believed in the safety of a steady paycheck. Each household earned less than 200 yuan a month and managed to save only a fraction of that. But a few bold families quietly caught on to the winds of reform and started their own businesses. Many of them later became powerful entrepreneurs. Take, for example, the Yu family, who lived next door to us. They opened a tiny scrap collection shop, hardly noticeable to anyone. Yet by supplying paper and cardboard to factories in the city, they gradually expanded into a full-scale production chain. Later, with the capital they accumulated and their sharp investment sense, they boldly entered the mining industry. By the early 2000s, that ordinary-looking couple had made it onto the Forbes list. I decided to stand on the shoulders of giants and learn from those who succeeded before me. I followed their footsteps closely, steadfast in my belief that if they could rise, so could I. In the end, I built a business empire even greater than in my previous life. By then, Mrs. Yu and her husband had become my dearest friends, partners in both success and hardship. I still remember her teary smile as she told me, "Emma, aside from my sister and my husband, you're the person I trust most. Every time I felt lost, you gave me strength and courage. Without you, we wouldn't have the life we have today." I laughed awkwardly, embarrassed by her gratitude, and quickly changed the subject. But that was a story 15 years down the road. For now, time flowed steadily, and things were just beginning to take shape. My aunt's culinary skills quickly made a name for the restaurant. Dishes like amber pork and first-class fragrant meat won the hearts of diners everywhere. Soon, the restaurant expanded into an upscale dining club, its signature dish, braised octopus, earning rave reviews. Branches opened even in neighboring provinces hundreds of miles away. Saying that money poured in like water wouldn't be an exaggeration. And now, the Lunar New Year was just around the corner. As my family gathered to tally up the year's accounts, one of my cousins told me something rather strange. He said that a few years ago, Adam, the youngest son of the Carter family, had failed his college entrance exams. The following year, unwilling to give up, he decided to try again. But juggling work and study left him exhausted, and, as expected, he failed once more. Still, he refused to quit. On his third attempt, he wanted to retake the exams yet again, but this time his parents stood in his way. George Carter, his father, cried and made a scene, telling his son that their home was falling apart, there was nothing left to eat, and debt collectors came by every day demanding payment. They had no way to scrape together even a single dollar. Adam looked around at their barren house, the empty yard, and the table with nothing but corn cakes and pickled vegetables. Finally, he gave up. He tossed his books aside and decided to follow some men to the coast to find work. When I heard that story, my heart wavered slightly. I couldn't tell whether I felt a trace of pity or satisfaction. In my previous life, because I had worked myself to the bone supporting that family, none of them, neither my in-laws nor Adam, had ever known a day of worry. They lived comfortably, without a care in the world. During the hardest year, I had even sold my own blood so Adam could afford to repeat his studies. The next year, he passed the exams and got into the major he'd wanted. Later, He married his professor's daughter, rose through the ranks, and became a well-known professor across the country. This time, though, things were different. In this life, Adam still dreamed of living an easy life like before, but his parents, two habitual pretenders who always feigned illness to manipulate others, could no longer provide him with a comfortable home. On the contrary, they made him serve them hand and foot. Every day, he had to walk more than 12 miles through the mountains just to reach school, since he couldn't afford a dorm room. After class, he still had to work in the fields, cook meals, wash clothes, and feed the chickens and pigs, while other families were pouring every bit of energy and savings into helping their children study for college. Adam's situation was so miserable that his failure was practically inevitable. But even after failing, he didn't give up. He set his sights on me again. He deliberately opened a small restaurant right across from mine, openly declaring war. In his previous life, Adam had been arrogant and cunning, and his brilliant business strategy this time was to copy my restaurant's entire menu and sell everything at half price. It was laughable, like a child playing shop. Not to mention that his cook only knew how to make simple, cheap dishes, nothing close to the refined recipes passed down in my aunt's family from imperial chefs. Such self-destruction didn't need any help from me. Within 3 months, his restaurant collapsed, so my aunt and I simply ignored them. No matter how much George or Adam exaggerated their marketing or tried to smear our name, we focused calmly on developing premium limited edition dishes. As expected, less than 2 months later, the Carter family's restaurant couldn't even afford to pay its chef and staff. They were sued by their employees and ordered by the guild to shut down for inspection. Within a week, a for transfer sign hung on their door. Rumors spread through the village that the Carter parents and Adam had been screaming at each other non-stop. The house was already falling apart, and now they were smashing what little they had left. They didn't even have a pot to boil water in. Just as the three of them were tearing into each other, a knock came at the door. "Mom, Dad, I'm home." It was Ryan. The man who had faked his death and disappeared for years now stood on the doorstep of the Carters' crumbling house, with his wife and child beside him. To the three desperate people inside, Ryan's sudden return was like a blinding flash of golden light. Their eyes immediately went to the same thought, the gold bars he had taken with him all those years ago. If he still had that gold, their debts and misery could all be erased. And so, after a few moments of forced small talk, the two brothers quickly dropped the pretense and went straight to the point. "Ryan," Adam said, "what about those gold bars? Give me a few. I'm in debt. I need to pay some people back." Ryan frowned. "I heard the family opened a restaurant. Can't you give me some money instead? I don't even have enough to pay for the trip home." After that, both brothers fell silent. Before long, word spread across the village. The Carter family's eldest son, the one everyone thought was dead, had come back. Not only that, but he'd gotten into a fight with his younger brother. The rumor spread like wildfire. The eldest son of the Carter family had beaten his own parents. In a time when news barely traveled beyond the village borders, even a single odd event could sprout wings and fly across every corner within days. One person told 10 told 100, and soon the story reached the city. Everyone now knew that the Carter family's eldest son, whom they had publicly declared dead years ago, had suddenly returned, only to end up brawling with his family and being dragged to the police station. After a fierce scolding from the officers, the family sat together in the station's back room, bruised and battered, staring at each other in silence. Broken furniture lay scattered around them. Ryan, looking utterly worn out, shoved Lily and their child into the west room to sleep. He had spent days hiding on buses without tickets, starving and freezing, traveling in secret. Now, finally back home, he hadn't even eaten a single hot meal before being dragged into a fight with his brother, and then hauled to the police. Though he was eventually released, there wasn't so much as a bowl of rice or even a cup of water waiting for him at home. Ryan's temper boiled over. When he listened to his parents' endless complaints and Adam's bitter accusations, his anger turned into pure rage. "Emma," he spat through clenched teeth. "That conniving woman!" He had thought that after faking his death, I would dutifully stay behind to care for his parents and his brother, so that he could focus on bigger things. But what had actually happened? The very day our divorce papers were signed, I had packed up all my dowry and left, never looking back. Ryan's lips twisted, his eyes burning with hatred. What infuriated him even more was the way people had been looking at him lately, those mocking glances. At first, he hadn't understood. But after Adam told him that I had once accused him of being less than a man, it all made sense. The image of the villagers' smirking faces made his eyes bloodshot. His parents clasped his hands, weeping and complaining about their miserable years, while Adam glared at him resentfully, blaming him for taking all the gold and disappearing, leaving the family to rot in debt. Ryan's mouth went dry as he stammered, "That gold, it was fake. It was fake." Adam sneered, "Do you think we're stupid? You didn't share a single bar with us." "Fine, then I'll go tell Emma's cousins that you stole the gold and faked your death to run away." He turned toward me then, adopting a pitiful tone. "So Emma, if you want to blame someone, blame my brother. Most of what happened before wasn't my fault. Go collect your debts from the one who owes you, not from me." Outside the Carter family's shabby little house, my aunt and cousins stood listening, their faces dark with fury. I stared at Adam's false sincerity, and I couldn't help but marvel. Every member of the Carter family truly was a born actor. No matter how many times they changed roles or masks, their nature never changed. They lived for deceit, always performing for their own benefit. What Adam didn't know was that his good brother, Ryan, had already come to see me first, and told a completely different story. Ryan had worn an expression full of sorrow and helplessness, his face twisted in pain as he said, "Emma, I never expected the doctors to be wrong about my illness. It was fate playing a cruel trick on us. It was Adam's idea. I only pretended to divorce you so you'd stay and care for my parents. But I truly loved you. I couldn't bring myself to hurt you. Now that I see you living well, I can finally be at peace." A single tear slid down his gaunt cheek and splashed onto the floor. Tilting his face up toward the ceiling, he struck a tragic pose, gazing upward at a 45-degree angle like some heartbroken romantic hero. I had no words. Maybe years ago, when he was still young, clean-shaven, and gentle-looking, that act could have fooled me again. But now, with his sallow skin, hollow cheeks, and eyes full of desperation, it was just pathetic. Revolting, even. So I decided to play along. I agreed to Adam's so-called truce, but only under one condition. "All right," I said evenly. "Since you've dared to come back, I'm sure your brother will too. In our previous life, he managed to uncover the secret my great-grandfather left behind and dug up a treasure buried beneath our ancestral land. If you can find out where that treasure is hidden, I'll give you half." Adam immediately agreed, his face lighting up with greed. One of my cousins followed him afterward, and later told me what he saw. Adam had gone to the market and bought a bundle of thick ropes, sharp knives, an axe, and several pairs of pliers. My cousin frowned as he recounted it, scratching his head. I thought maybe the Carters were getting ready to butcher a pig or something. When Ryan was finally found, rescued, and brought back, he was almost unrecognizable. Driven half mad. Even when an educated man resorts to torture, it's something altogether more vicious. Ryan's entire body was covered in injuries. Burns from hot oil, cuts from knives, bruises from pliers. One of his legs had been shattered, and all 10 of his fingernails had been ripped out. Villagers later discovered him lying unconscious along a mountain path behind the village. If someone hadn't happened to pass by before nightfall, he might have been dragged off by wolves before morning. Adam was arrested not long after, looking just as deranged. He was waving a blood-stained cleaver in the air, screaming like a lunatic. "It's all Ryan's fault. I was supposed to marry a rich girl, have kids, and become a professor. My sister-in-law could have paid for my tuition. She could have sent me to college." The villagers crowded around, whispering curiously among themselves. "Wait, his sister-in-law? Wasn't that the eldest son's wife? The one Ryan brought home years ago? Didn't Lisa always say that daughter-in-law was lazy and useless, just eating and sleeping all day? How could she have possibly afforded Adam's college tuition? Who believes a madman's words anyway? I swear, that family must have offended their ancestors. One son insane, the other crippled. Serves them right. Yeah, and the eldest one. Ryan was supposed to be dead. Now he's suddenly back with a wife and kid? But didn't people say he couldn't even have children? Who knows whose kids those are? Lily sat at the edge of the crowd, her face pale, her eyes hollow and unfocused. Ever since the Carter family's chaos began 10 days earlier, she'd been haunting the gate of my house, refusing to leave. She muttered to herself constantly, "Lies, it's all lies. The gold, it was fake, there were no gold bars, everything's gone, all gone." My parents and cousins had tried to drive her away many times, but every time she saw a group of people, she would crouch down, clutching her head, sobbing and shouting, "Don't hit me, please don't hit me, I was wrong." The neighbors and even the police were helpless, unsure what to do with her. Eventually, I told my family, "Just leave her be. If she wants to sit there, let her." After all, I had already bought a much larger piece of land in the neighboring city and moved my entire household there. The old place no longer held any value, it was just waiting for demolition. As a woman myself, I felt only a faint trace of pity for her children. Not laying a hand on her was already the greatest mercy I could offer. Ryan, on the other hand, tried to push all the blame onto Lily and Adam. In his delusion, he still dreamed that his ex-wife, the one who had once loved him so deeply, might return out of pity. He imagined I would once again work like a servant for him. No, that wasn't it. He knew I was wealthy now. In his twisted fantasy, I would take him back, feed him lavish meals every day, hand over all my assets for him to manage, and devote myself to domestic life, bearing his children and winning his affection all over again. One day, he even showed up holding a wilted bouquet of wildflowers, a confident smile on his gaunt face. "Emma," he said softly, "I finally realize now, you're the one who's truly right for me. Let's get married again. I promise, you'll never lose me this time." "Not thrilled?" he asked when I didn't reply. I smiled coldly. "Oh, I'm thrilled, all right. Thrilled that you ran fast enough back then to escape a beating, but don't worry, we'll fix that now." Within seconds, my parents and cousins, armed and ready, surrounded him. His screams and pleas echoed through the entire courtyard that night. Even after that, he still came back several more times, each time leaving with a bruised, swollen face. Eventually, he finally understood. I no longer had even a shred of affection for him, only hatred, deep and cold to the bone. By then, the year was 1990. My business had grown larger and more successful than ever. My cousins were thriving in their own careers, and my parents had long stopped pressuring me to marry or have children. I decided to adopt a pair of orphan siblings from a welfare home. My parents hesitated at first, unsure of the idea, but only a few days later, my parents were completely won over by the two little girls, soft, sweet, and full of life. They loved them as if they were their own flesh and blood, doting on them with all the warmth in their hearts. As for the antiques, calligraphy, and rare books that had been passed down in our ancestral home, after long and thoughtful discussion, my family and I decided to donate everything to the National Museum so that they could be properly preserved for generations to come. Every year, 1/3 of my company's profits were donated to national scientific research institutions. When I turned 40, the government awarded me an honorary title and a prestigious Medal of Distinction. Newspapers, magazines, and television stations all reported the story enthusiastically. At that same time, in a psychiatric hospital, a deranged man screamed at a television screen, "That's my money! It's all mine!" Not long after, he died quietly in his sleep from a heart attack. Ryan's parents had long since cut ties with their eldest son's family. Without my support, the two of them, too lazy to lift a finger, soon ended up begging on the streets. Neither Ryan nor Lily, despite their endless talk, ever gave them a single penny. One day, while I was traveling abroad with my parents, my gentle little daughter noticed two frail old beggars sitting by the roadside. She asked the driver to stop, then ran out of the car to hand them a few bags of pastries and 100 yuan. On the way back, she looked up at me innocently and asked, "Mom, why did those two old people keep staring at you and crying?" I smiled softly and said, "Kindness is a good thing, sweetheart, but when it comes to other people's stories, you don't need to be curious. We do good deeds not for gratitude, but so our conscience can rest easy." From that moment on, there was no more road ahead.